Today's podcast is brought to you by Patreon supporter John Hill. If you'd like to learn how you can support the podcast through a small, recurring monthly donation, log on to schooloflaughs.com/PATREON. We're also brought to you by Funny&amp.com. You know, comics, when you're out there doing your shows, you don't have time to fool around with setting up the video cameras, trying to get the sound right. You need to hire a professional to come out and record your show. Well, recently I was up in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. That's right, the city of brotherly love. And Funny&amp showed me some brotherly love by coming out and recording the show and providing clips to me that I can now promote my comedy with. I tell you what, they set up 2 cameras. It was really crystal clear video. In fact, if you go to this episode in the show notes, you can click on the link to see some of my video that they recorded. Kevin Hackenberg and his team at Funnier.com will take care of you and help you promote yourself online through great quality video. You know, he's got over 20 years of experience producing, directing, and shooting feature films, commercials, and live recordings. And now he is all about producing clean comedy content. So check out the team at funnyandamp.com. That's funny, A-N-D-A-M-E-N, funnyandamp.com.
Welcome to the School of Laughs podcast, brought to you by schooloflaughs.com. Whether you're an aspiring comedian, a part-time pro, or a speaker who wants to become funnier, this is the podcast for you. We'll break down tools, tips, and techniques to help you get bigger, better, and more bookable. And now, here's the show.
Welcome to the podcast. Rick Roberts here, and today I've got a fun little comedy campfire after-school special going on. What is that? That's when I sit around after one of my classes and just kind of chill out with the students. They ask a few questions, I offer a few answers, and we all learn something together. I figure since it's on their mind and they're just now getting started in comedy, it's probably on your mind too. So today they ask questions, and some really good ones. In fact, we have 4 big questions. The first is, how do you make a story funnier? How do you get a story stand-up ready on stage? We talk about that. We talk about how much creative license you have on stage. You know, you can only take things so far sometimes before the audience pushes back, so we'll talk about that. We'll talk about trying to define your stage persona. When you first start, man, that's a big question right there. And knowing that obviously would help you write material, but you may not know all that right off the bat. And we talk about that in great detail. And then we also talk about what it's like to live the life of a comedian. I've been doing this for, 26 years, and more than half my life. I'm 48, so definitely more than half my life. That's weird to think about. Man, I've got a couple of sweatshirts that are older than probably some people listening to this podcast right now. It's, oh man, I don't even want to think about that. Anyway, we talk about what it is like to be a comedian, how that affects everything else you do, your relationships, your family, all that kind of stuff, and knock that question out in this podcast as well. You know, before we get into it, I'm going to read one quick iTunes review, and if you hang with me for about 40 seconds, we'll be there to kick off the episode. This one comes from Rio James on February 28th, 2017, and it says, I love this show, 5 stars. First of all, I'm not even a comedian, but this show is very entertaining, inspirational, and educational. I've just binged the last 10 episodes or so and can't wait to knock out the rest. I've been a fan of Rick's for years. His clean comedy is funnier than all the foul comedians combined. Wow, thank you. And this podcast gives us a peek behind the curtain of comedy. Love it. Hey, thank you, Rio James, whoever you may be. And I hope you listen to a few more episodes, maybe get all the way through 130 or 140, whatever we got going on out there right now. Happy to have you along, and thanks for the review. All right, let's get into this week's episode, the After School Special. So I'm here at SIR, Studio Instrument and Rental here in Nashville, Tennessee, where we just finished our 3rd of 3 writing classes, and I've got a handful of students that stuck around to ask some questions, and I figure if it's on their mind, it's probably on your mind too, since you're listening to this podcast and you're all into comedy. So, sir, why don't you tell everybody your name and a little bit about yourself, or why you took the class, and then hit me with your question.
Okay. So
and get as close to that mic as you can.
My name is John. I'm a software engineer. And why did I take the class? It sounded like fun. One of the other students here is my brother-in-law, and he was talking about it. He was sounding really excited about it. And I thought to myself while he's explaining, I said, hey, that sounds like fun.
And was it fun?
It was a lot of fun.
Oh, good.
It was a ton of fun. And it's comedy has always been something I've read a lot about. and always been interested in, but never even close to that industry. So my question is, we've learned a lot about writing, and sort of we learned a lot about the different techniques to write, and particularly the kind of boils down to the make a statement, the premise, the punch, then the tag. And my question is about sort of maybe the next step. A lot of comics have the storytelling approach to comedy, and I was wondering if you could give us a couple of pointers, maybe guidelines on what makes a good story.
Yeah, that's a great question. There are I think a lot more comics now are telling stories than in the past. Comedy's gotten more conversational in a lot of ways, and the traditional, Rodney Dangerfield 16 jokes in 3 minutes thing still works, but there's more people doing the story. So how does a story still work in a comedy club environment or a comedy environment in general? I think, the story structure is going to stay intact. So, you've got person A along the lines, they bump into person B or whatever, or situation B that they have to overcome or challenge themselves to get better, whatever the conflict in the story is. You got to resolve the conflict, and then they move on. They either learn something from it or they make the same mistake again. And there's a lot of different varieties of story structure, but let's just say it's that structure. In each part of those 5 parts, you want to set up who that character is. So if it's you, the audience needs to know a little something about you so they can connect and pull for you. Just like in a story, you want to resonate with that character. But as you're doing that, you can describe yourself in a way that's funny with the self-deprecating joke. I'm the kind of guy who, every time I walk in a revolving door, the guy behind me ends up in front of me. That's my life. Give them a reason to laugh, but it also gives them some information about you. And then when you introduce the conflict, same thing applies. Then I met this girl that I thought I might marry, but she was from this type of family and I'm from this type of family. And go deeper into the, my type of family. On holidays, we did this, and it's a funny story with the punchline. Her family would do this, and it's funny, but it's different. It shows about her. And so you just move each step of the story along with you pause and a set structure, set up joke to where they can be laughing along through the story instead of waiting all the way for the major twist of the story to get the laugh. And, great comics to look at that do that. Bill Cosby back in the day was one of the best at telling stories. He had you hooked into it. It's interesting, and when he describes his brother Russell and all these guys, you can really picture them. And so you want to create visuals like that. Richard Pryor was great at telling life stories. Even after he became famous and he set his hair on fire by freebasing or whatever, he came back on his next special and told the story behind that and made it funny. So there's nothing off limits as far as what you can talk about for sure. And now there's a few comics that come to mind, but really to learn more about the structure of story in general, I think I mentioned last week the Moth Podcast is a great one. I'll link to that in the show notes for the listeners. But you hear some comics go on that podcast and do some of their famous bits, but they're telling them in story form. And so you can kind of just make some notes as they create their story on how often they're getting laughs, and just kind of use that as a blueprint for what you might want to aim for.
Okay.
But yeah, there's every story that, the best story to start off with as you start comedy is a story you always end up telling your buddies that you haven't seen each other in 10 years and you went to high school together, and you always talk about that one thing you guys got away with or what you did. That's a story you know pretty well. Now you just have to kind of make it accessible to people who don't know you. So some of that inside stuff that you can get away with saying to your buddies just by looking at each other, you got to make that part of the story.
Okay, great.
Cool.
Thanks, Rick. I'll see you in phase 2. And
we'll definitely take your stories down the road in that class.
Okay.
Very good. Thanks John.
Sure. Yeah. My name's Matt. I took the class. I'm a graphic designer. So for me, it was just a different outlet to be creative, a new way to think creatively, but also kind of curious about just trying to do an open mic around town. So, I feel a lot more comfortable about it now.
Good.
Just giving it a shot and experimenting along the way. So, but yeah, my question was just kind of started as I started writing, wondering how I can take a story, and when you add to it, how best you can embellish that joke or story, and how far you can take it and still keep the audience believing.
Right.
And maybe some examples you've had where you had a lot of success, or maybe one where it just didn't work out very well.
Sure. No, that's a good question. A few different questions in that question. I think the first one really is, how much can you embellish and how far can you take it? And from my experience, as long as the joke is rooted in a truth or a reality or a believable reality, you can take it a lot of directions. If you start with a premise that's really outlandish, unless that's your entire style and people know that's what's coming from you, and there's only been a few comics it's like Rob Schneider back in the 80s and 90s. He had a lot of jokes that started in really obscure, like he would open his refrigerator and see a tiny Elvis next to his milk. Like, that's a weird joke. Where do you go from there? You can't really go that far because you started weird, If you think about guys that do other material that are weird, like Emo Phillips, like that's an interesting guy to study in general. But his jokes are rooted in reality, and then he takes it as weird as he can get it from there. So one thing is, start with something that's believable and then see how far you can take it. The audience will always let you know if, when you're first writing it, you may not know. It really takes that first time you say it out loud on stage to see how far they'll go with you. And if you lose them at some point, that's a turning point in your joke to go back and fix and maybe add a fact or a more believable statement to kind of reel them back into this actually happened. And then you can really take it anywhere you want after you've established a joke and your initial punchlines and everything, just by asking the question, if this was in a dream, I would have done this. And then you can do anything that, as an illustrator, as a cartoon character, you can do anything because you're on paper, in a dream sequence, anything can happen. So you can take a joke really weird that way. But the great thing is the audience is going to let you know right there, they'll stop laughing if it's not believable.
So you think do you kind of respond to the audience, or like, okay, this is kind of reel it back a little bit or change it up? Or
yeah, what I do, and I'd be trying these out at open mics just like you would before I put them on my real show. And so I would be pushing it as far as I can, and when they stop, I'll go, okay, I guess that's where I need to go back and finish this joke next week. Or I'll, a lot of comics, and sometimes I'll say is, man, you guys can really sniff out a new joke a mile away. Or, apparently that was funnier in the shower than it is out here on stage, things like that. Just to kind of let them know that, okay, I'm not an idiot. I realize I didn't go where it should have gone, but I'll be back next week. I'll fix it, But always owning the reality is important.
Yeah.
If you pretend it's not there, then they start thinking that you don't realize it's not there. Then there's that really awkward moment, And then also, too, maybe having a couple of go-to lines for because it sounds like you're going to be the guy who wants to write some pretty crazy stuff. So,
well, I just want to bend reality, but make sure that it's nothing, people are totally not connecting with, so.
Yeah. I'd be prepared for them to kind of push back at some point because you want to push it as far as you can and just have some lines ready for when that happens. Like, one line I used to throw out when I was trying out new jokes would be, wow, no reaction at all. For more on that punchline, go to awkwardsilence.com. See how this joke ends,
Yeah.
Just to let them know that I know.
Gotcha.
And
Yeah.
And audiences the best audiences are extremely honest with you. The last thing you want is an audience that's going to give you polite applause or laughter just because they think they should. I always tell audiences, I'd rather you be honest so that I get this right sooner than to lie to me, especially at open mics. And you got to watch out too at open mics because sometimes the comics in the back will laugh and make you think the joke was good, knowing that you're going to do it next week in front of a different crowd thinking it was good, and they fooled you by laughing at it. You got to have your antennas up pretty high on the open mic sometime. I'm looking forward to what you come up with because it sounds like it might lead to some pretty cool places.
Yeah, thanks, Rick. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thanks, Matt. All right, we got another guy pulling up a chair. Tell us who you are and why you took the class, and we'll jump in.
Rick, how you feeling?
Good, man.
I'm Jeffrey C. I took this class. I used to be a script doctor in Los Angeles.
Very cool. And people that don't know what a script doctor is, give them a quick sentence or two.
You go in and you fix other people's mess ups or plot points or inciting incidents are off, or was it powerful enough to make the real pow to it. You basically clean up other people's work. Their name goes on it. You get paid. It's okay.
Yeah, I know some guys out there that do that. It's not a bad deal.
Sure, why not? And stand up is on my bucket list, my lifetime. Took this class because I really wanted to know structure. Obviously, being a screenwriter, structure is everything to me. a little bit of OCD involved.
Right.
I need some structure. And it was dead on what I was looking for.
Oh, great. That's good to hear.
Dead on. The structure part, because I can think that way. I can think in blocks. I can think in sections.
That's cool. Yeah, I'm the same way. Like if I can see a blank space, I know where to put something.
Exactly.
But if the entire page is blank, there's no little square around a place where I put something, I can't do it.
Yeah.
So knowing where I can plug stuff in, that's good to know, man.
Yeah.
Thank you.
My question was, what would you recommend to a new comic trying to find out who their stage persona is going to be? Could be important when they sit down and work on their material, I think.
Yeah.
So right off the bat, how could they find that?
Well, even before you write your first joke, what you could do, and I even recommend this to comics throughout their career, is to gather up some of your best buddies and say, listen, what do you guys say about me when I'm not here? How do you describe me to friends who have never met me? Seriously. And just tell them, be honest. Say, if you have negative things, you say, I want to hear that too. I want to hear every aspect. And, if they don't jump on board with that, start telling them what's wrong with them and all the things you say about them. And then they're going to fire back the stuff that they're holding back. But that's an important thing to do, because in your mind, you have an idea loosely. You may not have it, really defined yet, but you kind of know what you think you want to do on stage. And you sort of have an idea of what you think will work on stage. But if that idea isn't congruent with what people see when you step on stage, it's going to make it harder. Now, you can definitely take what they see on stage and go polar opposite, so it's surprising and you have juxtaposition by what you're doing on stage, and it works because it's so different. And why would that guy be talking like this, But being really in tune with your friends kind of know you. Sometimes they have a perspective that you don't have anymore because you've been in your skin forever, but they see you, they've seen the changes you've gone through. They also know, your good friends will know the big moments that changed your perspective. He was this way until he met her, or until she left, or until, this thing happened in his family or whatever. And those turning points in your life are important to write jokes and material around too. And if you do that and write material that you can put in early in your set, not only are you helping the audience understand who you are, but you're setting up kind of a flow of where your material might want to come from. So, if you feel like, if you always felt like an outlier, if you always felt like you've always been working for somebody else instead of yourself, if you always feel like you're a people pleaser, those are things you kind of know about yourself, but your friends are going to give you the stuff that's more concrete, the real traits and characteristics you have.
Yeah, I've heard some of their stuff.
Are there any things that they say now that you agree with that you think, well, I can write from that perspective? That is kind of me?
I think there are versions of it's a little bit extreme.
Yeah.
I think, well, that sounds about right, but you're cranking it up to a 10. I felt like that was about a 4.
Right.
So,
Well, that's another.
But maybe that's who it is. Maybe I'm a 10.
Well,
on that level.
On stage, I always say, be like 115% or more of who you are off stage. If you're an interesting person off stage and you can tell some funny stories, that works around friends, that works around casual acquaintances. On stage, you have to be a little extra interesting, the most interesting version of yourself, the most entertaining version of yourself. If you're a depressed comic, the most depressed version. If you're confused, the most confused version, because you want to give some people something they can relate to. That's the first 100%, and then that next 15% is stuff they're like, whoa, I've never seen that before. Yeah. Or in the best case scenario, if you have the ultra fan, like finally somebody who is just like me, but they wouldn't have identified if you didn't throw in that extra 15%. You know what I'm saying?
No, exactly.
So it will change too as you go throughout. That's why I say to even comics that have been doing it for 5 or 10 years, email some of your best friends, people that have seen you on stage and off, and say, how do you describe me when I'm not around? Because the audience may be perceiving you that same way, but you hadn't written material from that slight twist or tweak to your perspective. So it's cool that you're aware of that now and you're thinking ahead. Yeah, and get that feedback and work with the parts that seem to that you identify with.
That's great. That's right on target.
Cool. I can't wait to see what comes out of it.
All right, Rick. Thanks a lot.
You bet. This is Charity. Tell us a little bit about you and why you took the class.
Well, hi, I'm Charity, obviously. And I decided to take this class because, mostly just because I'm a very strange and comedic person. like just in general. And I got pretty good at talking to people and banter and just being witty on the spot. And I was like, well, I need to write this stuff down, so let's learn how to write it down. So that's why I'm here.
Very cool. Very cool.
All right. And my question was, well, I guess it's a question. It was, how was it like? What is it like, kind of living the life, like doing shows and like having to deal with other comics and just the business in general? Like, can it be cutthroat? Can it be tiresome? I know sometimes it'll take a long time before you get a hit, and then it's like bam, 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 bam. But what is that really like?
Yeah, that's a great question, and something we don't really talk about in the writing class, which is I'm glad you brought it up here, because it'll be slightly different for everybody, obviously, depending on where you start and the comedy scene or whatever. But in general, when you first start, you have a lot of stuff going on in your head that's not really there. All right, so I bet every comic listening who's done one open mic or 100 will tell you that the first time they went to an open mic, they felt like everybody was staring at them. You know, like, oh, this is going to be too hard to pull off, and it's all in your head. And then after you get going a little while, you start making friends with other comedians, and whether you realize it or not, other comedians are looking at you as a competitor, and they hate you because you're on stage and you might have better jokes than them. And they're like, well, you know, I don't need that person taking my 5 minutes on stage up by being funnier than me. So you never even talk to that person or say anything to upset them, but they're naturally the newcomers trying to take my territory.
That sounds a lot like high school.
Well, I'll tell you what, the open mic scene is a lot like that. There's kind of cliquey over here. It's not so much cliques as people have started at the same time. They know each other.
Right.
They kind of want to see if you're going to last longer than 6 months before they even get to know you, because so many comics don't make it past that. They kind of try it 2 or 3 times and they're gone. So just like it's investing time in a relationship, they're not going to do that with a stranger until they kind of see you're sticking it out, and probably that you're making some progress at it and you're digging it. Then as you start to hit the road a little bit, you know, the first phase you'll be driving, you know, we're in Nashville, so you'll be driving to Birmingham to do some sets down there, Huntsville, Louisville, Lexington. You might drive to St. Louis. And so it's almost like it all starts over again. You've never been to St. Louis, so you may have met somebody that came through Nashville that did an open mic, and they said, hey, when you come to St. Louis, this is the place to go. And you kind of, now you're the new person from out of town. Sometimes you're a bigger threat because they must be pretty good. They drove here from Nashville or whatever. But it's all perception, you know. You might make some buddies at that spot and then eventually start getting some paid work. Then when you get on the road, you have to be a very disciplined person, and you really have to stick to what your goals are and really have some structure to your day, or else it can all fall apart as faster than it came together. You know, best case scenario, you end up working with comics. You know, a comedy club will usually either have hotel rooms for the comics, or they'll have a condo where usually the headliner and the feature will stay in the condo, or the MC and the feature will stay in the condo, and the headliner, who's a bigger name, gets his own hotel room. But you'll be sharing space with another comedian, and man, it can go either way. And when it's not a person that you're compatible with hanging out with, it's a miserable week. I mean, there were times where I checked out of the condo, for lack of a better term, and went and got my own hotel so I didn't have to hang around the negativity all week. Oh
boy, yeah.
Best case scenario, I mean, I had guys that, you know, saved me from. There was a time where I was put up in a really bad hotel, and the headliner and the feature took the condo because it was within walking distance of the club. And then we don't want to put an MC at a nice hotel. Let's give him this, literally a flea bag, pay by the hour kind of ridiculous place. And I told the headliner, he's like, where are you staying at? I told him, he's like, no. You can have the fold out couch here at the condo. There's no reason for you to drive that far and stay at that. So a class act like that makes it all worthwhile, because then you're bonding over, you know, he's been in that spot before, she's been in that spot before, you start kind of getting along. And then that week in the condo, at some point, you guys hang out, you're drinking coffee, and you're throwing ideas back to each other. And on the best weeks, the comics are like holding each other accountable, like, listen, this stuff you said this afternoon, you've never done it on stage? Never done it on stage? You got to do it this week. You do that, and I'll do this joke. And, you know, they put the pressure on you to work, because when you get to the level where you're getting work, you tend to get into this cocoon of only doing your best tried and true material, and you stop growing for a while. And part of that's because you're trying to keep the job that you just got for the first time at the Improv or the Funny Bone or the Zanies or whatever.
Yeah.
But at some point, you need to realize that you can't keep doing the exact same set as an opener or feature. You shouldn't as a headliner, but a lot of guys and gals do. Once they get their hour that works, they don't change it. And then the lifestyle itself, you think are you self-starter pretty much? Are you good at being independent?
Well, I am. Yeah, I'm Miss has a new idea every 2 weeks. So
Yeah, so you got your thing going on. You'll have a lot of downtime. I mean, that's the hardest part when you first start. You got all day long, and as an opener, you got 15 minutes to perform, and then you have the other 23 hours and 45 minutes to think about how that performance went. And if you get negative in there, then it's you don't feel good till you have a good set again. If you allow yourself to think that way, it can be really tough. It's a lot of miles in the car, a lot of doing gigs for free just to kind of get into the network and get into the next city and meet those comics. But once the wheels start turning, I've been doing it for 26 years. Like it's always a grind in a different way. Now it's a great grind. I'm going to do gigs that, treat me really well, but sometimes there's like 4 gigs in 4 cities that are flights, 2 connecting flights away, 3 days in a row. Instead of driving the 500 miles and popping out to do 15 minutes, now it's that kind of grind sometimes. But at the end of the day, you're doing what you love to do. Every show is different. No show goes exactly like you think it's going to go. You can look at an audience. There's been definitely nights where I look at the audience like, I don't have a chance. This is not my crowd. We started at 11 o'clock at night. I'm an 8 o'clock comedian now, They're all 22. I'm 48. And then I go up and it's like one of the best shows of the year.
Oh, well, that's great. Yeah.
Then there's other weeks where I look out and it's all 48 years old people. And I'm like, this is my crowd. And they're like,
and they're just like,
we want something different than a guy that looks just like us that tells, So you never know. But you learn how to adjust on the fly and make the shows work.
Yeah.
And that's always cool. The hard part is with your family. You're sometimes gone longer than you want to be. I started when I was really young, so I didn't have family or anybody to be held responsible to, and my bills were low, and that kind of gave me an advantage over somebody that starts a little bit later. But my disadvantage was I didn't have as much life experience to talk about. So every level there's a trade-off, but if you like seeing the world, seeing the country, getting paid to do it at some point, all my best friends, I've got 3 great friends from high school that I'm still close with, and then hundreds of I consider close because I spent weeks with these people. And when you see them, you pick up right where you left off, and it's and when you see them have success, I've never done the late night TV shows. I've probably got 30 fairly close friends that have, and it's just very cool to see them get up there and knock it out, and what they went through and all that.
Yeah, that sounds pretty great.
So it's there's nothing more fun, especially if you find that it's in your wheelhouse. You just got to be patient when you feel like it's got to happen tomorrow. And then when it's happening tomorrow, you got to chill out and make sure you're ready for it. But yeah, it's a lot of fun.
All right. Thank you.
Absolutely. Okay, great. Thanks, class, for all the questions. I know it looks like I've got some of you guys headed for the performance class and the improv stuff, so I'll see you guys just in a couple of weeks. Thanks again for taking the writing class. I'm glad to hear you got some stuff out of it. And you've got a couple more weeks to send me those jokes from the assignments if you want to do that. Thanks again, and talk to you guys later.
Thanks, Rick.
Hey! There you go. Hope you enjoyed that. A good bunch of students, as you can tell, really sharp, and that makes it extra fun for me as a teacher to have people that are thinking above and beyond what we're even doing in class. They're already thinking down the road. I love it. Hey, if you're wondering about upcoming classes in Nashville, Tennessee, let me go ahead and tell you what we've got going on here since I've got them pulled up right in front of me. The Business of Comedy Seminar, that's where we sit around for 3.5 hours max and dig deep into what's going on when you become a stand-up comedian, what steps you need to take, when you can expect to take them, what not to waste your time on, what to invest in, all the different aspects of turning your comedy into an actual comedy business. That's going to happen on Saturday, May 13th from 1 to 4 p.m. out here in Hermitage at the School of Laughs headquarters. Nice. The investment on that class is $99, and that is a lifetime membership. So if you've taken this class in the past and you've got new questions or you have some brushing up to do, feel free to stop out and see us at that class. We also have a performance class coming up really soon. That's Mondays, April 10, 17, and 24 from 6 to 8 p.m. We have one spot left for that class. It's going to be pretty loaded with some funny people. I'm looking forward to that right now. That's going to be held downtown at SIR Studio Instrument and Rental on 1101 Cherry Street in Nashville, Tennessee. Mondays, April 10, 17, and 24, 6 to 8. The investment in that class is $200. And that is not a lifetime membership, but you can come back as many times as you like if you want to take that class. You just can't do it for free. Sorry, can't give away everything, but I try to do the best I can. If you want to learn how to write stand-up comedy and you haven't had a chance to do that yet, we've got the writing class coming up just around the corner. Pulling it up right now. We've got it going on May 8th, 15th, and 22nd from 6 to 8 p.m. That investment is $200, and that is a lifetime membership. You can come back and sit in on that class, as many students do, over and over again until it sinks in, or you pick up new tips from your new perspective further down the road. Again, that's Mondays, May 8, 15, and 22 from 6 to 8 p.m. That's downtown at SIR, 6 to 8 p.m. Lastly, the ever-elusive Improv Class, Introduction to Improv Level 1 Games. That will happen just after the performance class. So 6 to 8-ish for the performance class, and then as soon as that class is wrapped up, we flip the stage and we start working on improv. Again, same dates, April 10, 17, and 24, from right around 8 o'clock all the way up till 10 o'clock if we need it. And the investment in that class, 200 beans on that one. That's also at SIR in Nashville, Tennessee. If you'd like to get on the class and you just can't do it because you don't live here in Nashville, no fear. We've got the online comedy class. You can jump into that anytime at schooloflaughs.com. Check out the online class comedy link, and you can get 20% off right now on the silver edition of that class if you use the code BETTERCOMEDY at checkout. Boom. All right, that's going to do it for this week. I appreciate you listening. I thank you for the iTunes reviews. And as always, stay safe and stay funny.
Thanks for listening to the School of Laughs podcast. If you'd like to hear more School of Laughs podcasts, you can find them on iTunes and Stitcher.com. And don't forget to subscribe and leave a review. For information on upcoming live and online classes, visit schooloflaughs.com. Until next time, stay tuned, stay focused, and stay funny.